BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Friday, another Anything Goes Friday. Welcome to the show. My guest on the program today will be Sam Fisher, who's going to talk to us all about the serial killer Joseph Paul Franklin, who was known as the Racist Killer. Joseph Paul Franklin was a traveling serial killer who moved about the country, attacking people in different ways. And Joseph Paul Franklin is also an alternative Zodiac killer suspect, so Sam Fisher will be a guest on a future episode of Zodiac Monday. And I would like to remind everybody, if you want to follow along with these true crime discussions, you can hit the like button and subscribe. And I would like to welcome Sam Fisher to the program.
His parents trying to basically go wherever work took them, but for the most part, I think he mostly grew up there in Mobile, Alabama, and by multiple sources, like it was a pretty abusive childhood. So his father would definitely beat his mother and beat the children. His father was an alcoholic. They divorced, I believe, in 1965, and once his father left, Franklin later said that it was actually his mother who was also then abusive towards the kids, and he had always felt that his mental growth was stunted by how his mother would treat him and his siblings. So I don't know the specifics on, but he called his mother sadistic. I know there was one incident in which he brought a dog home and she just simply boiled some water and then poured it on the dog, and stuff like that. Like it just like it. So he grew up in a very abusive household. Even by, I think there was an interview of his sister, and even she said that it was just pure hell living at home. So I know that there was an incident in which I think like he was by one account like he had messed up his right eye in a bicycle accident, but I think he later said in an interview him and his brother were playing with some sort of like spring that rolls up the shade on a window shade, and I think that that spring had sprung or something and hit him in the right eye, and his mother was supposed to take him to the hospital, but she never took him back to get it like properly corrected. So he spent the rest of his life mostly blind in the right eye. And and I think he dropped out of school, I think at 15, 16, something like that. So does that answer the question, or?
Yes, I think that's a very suitable answer, because the next question is going to be, in his teen years,
Mm-hmm.
do you think that he was inspired to kill, radicalized, influenced by outside sources to go on to become a serial killer?
In his teen years, I believe so. Around that time that he dropped out of high school. And this is one of the problems that I've had with trying to research Joseph Paul Franklin. There's always multiple accounts of what. So at some point, I think around the time of 15 or 16, he stole a copy of Mein Kampf. So, and now, I think later in an interview, he said that he didn't join the Nazi Party until I think it was like he was 18. But then I think that there's FBI documents that say that no, he went off to as early as like I think 16 to Arlington, Virginia. So there's it's really hard to pin down at what point did he start to become very radicalized. I know it's hard. It's really hard to say like what the major influence was, because when he, according to his sister and according to himself, he was very much into religion. in his teens. Like he apparently had visited just about every church in Mobile, Alabama, and they could, people say that they could, he was always out there walking with his Bible, going to these different churches. So, but at the same time, apparently he also became involved with white supremacist organizations in the Nazi Party. And I don't know at what point, but um, I think um, I'm not sure at what point he became involved in something called the Christian Identity. I don't know if you can call it a movement or church, but are you familiar with Christian Identity at all, Ned?
No, I'm not actually. What is it?
Okay, so it's I guess you could say it's like it's sort of like a white nationalist version of Christianity. So in which they basically teach that well, the gist of what I know is that the white race is the true, and I'll tell you why this is relevant here in a second. That the white race is the true Jewish people. So he actually practiced. I think at around some point he actually believed, and I think he may have even believed this up into his 20s, like that he was actually a Jewish person, and that and so this is the kind of stuff, and he actually practiced I think observing some of the Jewish months and calendars and things like that. So couple that with of course becoming involved in like Nazi ideology, and yeah, you definitely have a mix for something that's not good.
I see. And when did Joseph Paul Franklin commit his first murder?
That was in 1977. That was I think he had drove up to, I think it was Madison, Wisconsin, in not for the purpose of killing an interracial couple, but he went up there to assassinate a judge, and like a judge who I believe was Jewish, and he was angry that this judge had also let off some, I think, some teens who were black that, like, I think went on to commit other crimes, and I think that had enraged him enough to like actually drive up to Madison, Wisconsin, and he got involved in some altercation there in the parking lot of a mall there, and it actually what was it? He was in front of this car, and apparently he was driving too slow for the couple who were in the car, and no, I'm sorry, it's switched. So he was behind the car, and he was honking his horn for them to go faster, and they started going slower. So when and it was a couple. It was a guy and a girl, and the man was black, and when he came out the car to confront Joseph Paul Franklin, he said he later said, yeah, it was more of a spur of the moment thing. He just took out his gun and just shot him, and then got out of his car and just went up to the girl, and simply because she was white, and he didn't like interracial couples, and just shot her too.
Okay, that sounds like a couple of different elements there, because the first one that I'm hearing is he is a very calculating serial killer. He has a victim chosen. He's driving to a location to assassinate a specific individual. And I'll have a question for you about the judge in just a second. But then it also sounds like he's an impulsive serial killer because, as you said, everything with the murder of the interracial couple is not planned, has not been planned. And it's just something that he had in a spur of a moment decision. Granted, it was road rage, and people do shocking things during moments of road rage. But my question for you was, what was the exact reason for assassinating the judge, or having the plan to assassinate the judge? Excuse me.
Well, he was angry that the judge had let off. I don't know. I can't remember if it's like one or two. I think teen African American boys who, gosh, I wish I could remember the specifics, but I believe that he was enraged that they were let off by the judge and then had gone on to commit other crimes. And where he got this information, I don't know. I can only assume that, of course, like he's probably reading a lot of Klan and Nazi literature and magazines and pamphlets and stuff like that. So I don't know where he got this information, but yeah, that I think I did read somewhere where like he planned to just show up at the house of the judge and just knock on the door or ring the doorbell and just kill the judge right there, right at his doorstep. But of course that didn't happen because he had this road rage incident. And like as far as it being his first murder, I think that's always been a little bit suspect. And I'll tell you why. He gave an interview to MSNBC, and you can actually watch it online. And I think a forensic psychologist, her name is Mary Ellen O'Toole. I think even during the interview, she said that the brazenness of the crime, like somewhat makes her wonder if that was actually his first time doing that, like just how brazen it was. So, but officially on paper, I believe that that's like the first.
But what do you think about that? Because as I've just said, I've seen road rage disputes where maybe someone didn't get murdered, but there could even be close. I mean, like cars like swerving over lanes and doing crazy stuff, as well as just shouting altercations. And, some guy who has homicidal tendencies with a gun in the car, that doesn't surprise me at all that a road rage incident would boil over. Now, I'm not saying that she's wrong or anything. It's just based on that alone, I would definitely have a few questions for her. But what about you, though? Because you've looked into Joseph Paul Franklin extensively. Do you believe that that was his first crime? And I know your answer. Of course, but you have to share it for the audience, please.
I personally don't think that was his. And there's another reason why so let's do away with the fact that, of course, I think later on we're going to get into what I think are connections to the Zodiac killer. But there was like several interviews where he was asked on multiple times, like, when did you first think about committing murder? And in that same interview that I was telling you about, like on MSNBC, he said about 18. He said that he started thinking about killing people late 17. I think he said 18. So and something else that as you start to research Joseph Paul Franklin, I don't think nobody has come out and said it, but there's reasons as to why I think this, that I don't think that law enforcement was ever satisfied, that like his known confessions and his suspected. So he was convicted of I believe 8 times. I think he was given 2 death sentences, if I'm not mistaken, and I think he actually confessed to 18. But he was suspected in, I think, in as much as 22. Now, every time he gets interviewed, he gets asked that question: how many people did you kill? And I can't. And the reason I personally think that the people giving the interview were actually coached by law enforcement to ask this question, because I really don't believe that law enforcement ever thought that he that he was being forthcoming with how much he confessed to. Reason being is because he was asked that question multiple times, and I can't help but think that law enforcement in the prison system were always trying to extract more confessions out of him. But the other frustrating thing about, like, as you start to research him, was there was usually some sort of self-serving reason as to why he was confessing to a crime. Like, because remember now at this point, so he's in jail, I think up in Marion Correctional Facility, I think up in Illinois. I think that's where it's at. But as so in this is a little explanation, but this does get into like why he would not have confessed to some of his crimes. So he was stabbed, I think 17, 18 times when he first entered the prison system, because he was in the general population. So like he then felt that the state was always trying to have him murdered or killed. So now the game, according to, like, well, probably from his perspective, is now he's trying to navigate the prison system by only confessing to certain murders. Then he gets like to the he was executed in Missouri, but he actually wanted to be transferred from Marion to, I believe it was Potosi Correctional Facility down there in Missouri, because like he always felt that in that federal penitentiary up there in Marion, he always maintained that the guards were out to kill him. Everybody was out to kill him. He was, I guess this gets into some of his paranoia. Like he believed that everybody was against him. Added to that, I guess this adds to his the frustration of trying to study Joseph Paul Franklin. He also, like, as strange as it sounds, believed that there were too many informants in the Nazi Party and in the KKK, which is why he became a lone wolf killer. So
Now, Joseph Paul Franklin is a different type of serial killer, because from time to time we see serial killers that are just living normal lives. They have a career, occupation, and when they are not with work or their families, that is when they do these criminal activities. But with
right,
Joseph Paul Franklin, he was a traveling serial killer
yeah.
going all over the country. And would you like to talk about those aspects of his behavior?
Yeah, so uh yeah, he that's how he operated. He was I don't think that before the 60s, early 70s, there was like as far as I know, I don't think law enforcement like sort of like had an inkling that there was such a thing as as like a traveling serial killer, particularly like Joseph Paul Franklin. So so then the question is like how in the world did he fund all this? Well, like he was out there robbing banks. Um, and like so uh now as far as like being able to keep all of this a secret, it, as best I can tell, he's been on the road traveling ever since he was probably about I'm just gonna say I think like late 17, since he was 17, 18. He he I know that like his traveling days, like at least he was saying that he was traveling. And this you might have to remind me in for the next episode to kind of get more into it, because this is what ties a little bit into some suspicion for the Zodiac. So I know that in 1969, I believe, yeah, 1969, like he told a friend that he who was from Ohio, that he had been to Ohio many times, and this was like when he was 18. Now keep in mind that like his life after probably about 15, 16 is very murky. Like there's different accounts of where he was at. On one account, he's in Virginia. By another account, he went to Georgia. He's telling a friend that he had been to Ohio many times, and he's only 18. He maintained that he was a trucker. So he's out there saying that he's out there trucking at 18, which I find I don't buy that. But I don't doubt. But I think that he is out there traveling the country somehow. Even when he was married, like he, according as best I can tell, like law enforcement really does believe that like he actually kept his traveling life secret even from his wives. So like I think for some of his known killing spree in the late 70s, he said that I think he was saying that he was a plumber that had these like big contracts over and apparently he would just come home with just like stacks of cash, and I don't think his wife ever really kind of questioned it. So at least that's and um, at least I can only assume that the FBI in law enforcement um, his wife in the late 70s that she had no idea that he I think and if I remember right, I think I don't even think that she even knew his full name. I think her last name was she took on his last name at the time, which was Cooper. Like he had gone by the last name of Cooper, and her last name was I think she had taken the last name Cooper. So she had no idea that he was going around as Joseph Paul Franklin or probably born James Vaughn Jr. So you're talking about extremely secretive person who probably was able to keep all of the stuff a secret even from his own wife.
And I just want to remind the audience that I'm talking to Sam Fisher all about Joseph Paul Franklin, a serial killer known as the Racist Killer. And I also want to remind you guys that if you like this episode, you can hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. And feel free to go through some of the links in the description box. One of them is for BuyMeACoffee.com, BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNid88. That allows you to make a donation or contribution to support the show. And anybody who makes a donation will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday. And also, because this is the Anything Goes Friday, if there are any guests that you would like to hear on the program, or there are any true crime cases that you would like discussed, please put your ideas down below. Or if you have something that's longer, you can send it to me via email at blackboxonlineradio@aol.com. And Sam, I do have a couple questions for you about Joseph Paul Franklin and his identity. Firstly, what was his birth name, and how many aliases was he known to use in his lifetime?
So his birth name was James Clayton Vaughn Jr. And as far as how many aliases he used in his lifetime, I think I started get I want to say I started an Excel sheet, and I think in the around like 20 known. But I think that's a little bit suspect because according to I think it was the book Dark Soul of the South by an author Mel Ayton. He at one point when he was in prison, he actually wanted for whatever reason to give the FBI a list of all the known aliases. So the only thing that I can think of is that there was probably a lot more than 20. So like when they were investigating Joseph Paul Franklin, so this when they first were started really getting on his tail about the murders. I think it was the murders in Salt Lake City. He had sniped these two young men there in Salt Lake City, and they found they were researching, I think, at different hotels, and he had stayed at multiple hotels, like with multiple different names, and that's just in one city, I think, within 1 week. So that tells you probably the numbers that you're looking at is the like how many aliases, and I think when they actually caught him, I think that they just I don't know the exact number, but they said that they just caught him with a plethora of different IDs. So let's just say you're probably looking at a lot of aliases and a lot of IDs.
But in all of the sources that I've encountered, he's listed as Joseph Paul Franklin. Did he legally change his name? And if so, did he state a reason? Have you encountered anything about that?
As to like when he changed his name and why he changed his name to Joseph Paul Franklin?
Well, yes, two-part question. It was
Yeah,
like, did he change his name to Joseph Paul Franklin legally, and did he ever
yeah.
provide a reason?
Yeah, so he changed it, I think, in 76, 77 over in Maryland. So he changed it legally from James Clayton Vaughn Jr. to Joseph Paul Franklin. Now, um, most sources will say that like it was in order, like the reason he changed it to Joseph Paul Franklin was to honor one of his heroes, Paul Joseph Goebbels of well, one of the high-ranking Nazis of the Nazi Party in World War II. Um, as to why he changed it, he later said that he wanted to change it so that he could fly out of the country as Joseph Paul Franklin, and he wanted to fly to Rhodesia and fight with the Rhodesian army, specifically to kill what he called black people down in Rhodesia. And that was the reason that he gave as to changing his name was to be able to fly out of the country under that name.
And he wanted to fly to Rhodesia, which is present-day Zimbabwe, but
Hmm.
was there something that was preventing him from using his current name, or did he just not want to be associated with that when he's in another country? I mean, I guess I'm a little bit confused as to why he would do that. And maybe there isn't a clear answer, but I mean, if someone's legally changing their name but only in America, yet he's going to be
Hmm.
using the same name in Rhodesia, that doesn't seem like it's going to solve any problem. Was it maybe it
I
was
th-
just symbolic for him?
well, it might have been symbolic, but I think that the main reason was so that he could travel for some I know that in the early 70s they had put a warrant out for his arrest for I think macing an interracial couple, and he never showed up to his court date. So he had a warrant out under that name, James Clayton Vaughn Jr. Um, Probably along with like other related crimes. So but I mean that's as best as I can determine was that just because he probably couldn't board a plane for some reason, or like because of course you need a passport, right? But but I but yeah, that's as best as I can tell. I don't I mean who knows?
Well, that actually does provide a clearer reason as to why he would change his name, because he had a warrant out for his arrest, and people are going to be
Hmm.
looking for James Clayton Vaughn Jr. So that I can comprehend. But now we've talked about Joseph Paul Franklin, the aliases that he's living. He has some very, what I would call, twisted types of thinking. But we've only talked about a handful of the crimes that he has committed.
Hmm.
Now, would you like to share any more details about the murders or attempted murders that have been attributed to Joseph Paul Franklin?
Uh, there's a lot. So I'm going through. I actually have a list here. You, I mean, you're talking. I think what's for people in the true. I guess I can say the true crime world. I think what makes him an outlier is that, and this is probably why John Douglas wrote an entire book um, about Franklin. He seems to defy sort of like placing him in this box of all serial killers. Like he really is um, sort of like in his own, I guess you could say, category. So um, his, I guess you could say, modum operandi seemed to change. So he had aspects of both organized and disorganized killings. He planned, and some of them were spur of the moment. The like he was incredibly hard to catch, that's for sure. He definitely changed or liked to change weapons after every crime. He had used bombs, um, and um, I'm sorry. What was I'm sorry. I forgot the original question. Could you say that again?
I just asked if you wanted to share some details about how he committed additional crimes, because you had told us the story about how he had the plan to assassinate the judge, and while he's on the way, he gets into the road rage dispute, he kills the interracial couple.
Uh-huh.
But other than
Right.
that, we hadn't talked too much about how this traveling serial killer went about committing the crimes, and you just shared some details about the explosives. Please continue.
Yeah, so the I'm trying to so he I'm just because there's so much I've actually got kind of an Excel sheet here. So before his first known murders, he actually started out with bombing. So he bombed an Israeli lobbyist house in Washington D.C. His name was Morris Amate. So he started out with that. That was on the 25th of July, 1977. 2 days later, he bombs. He was in Chattanooga, Tennessee. He bombs the Beth Shalom Synagogue in Chattanooga, which I believe I don't know if he got prosecuted for that later, but um, let's see. And then that was on the 27th of July that he set off a bomb in Chattanooga. Just about, I think, a little over a week later, he kills the couple there in Madison, Wisconsin. And about exactly 1 month later, he was in, looks like he was in Little Rock, Arkansas, to buy a 30-06 rifle on the way to Dallas. And I think that same month he was looking for another synagogue to bomb over in Oklahoma City. But yeah, he was just he's just all over the place. I can it's just traveling the country, just trying to find places to bomb and kill. Let's see. October. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was about to say. So apparently didn't find anything in Oklahoma City to bomb, so he heads down to Missouri, and this is the crime he actually got executed for. Was he sat outside a synagogue over there in Missouri, and killed one man, Gerald C. Gordon, and from there, looks like he probably took a couple months off, but not just a few months later, in February of '78, kills somebody in Atlanta, Georgia, and then the very next month, he that's when he tried to kill Larry Flint there in Atlanta, Georgia. So he's like a really active individual during this time.
Crime. Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
You were finished. Pardon me. But that was the crime that I was going to ask you about, because one of the most famous things that Joseph Paul Franklin has done, maybe the most famous, is the attempted assassination of Larry Flint from Hustler magazine. And would you like to share something about that?
Yeah. So what I found kind of interesting, and then we'll get into this in the next like segment about like the Zodiac is he basically got away with that of a high profile sniping of Larry Flint. So what the backstory on that was he was enraged that like he had picked up a Hustler magazine and saw a picture of an interracial couple in Hustler magazine, and he later said that it just made him so sick to the stomach he decided that he was going to kill Larry Flint. And so at that point, that was his one and only mission, was to kill Larry Flint. So I forgot, I think it was a 44 rifle that he had shot Flint with, but he went up to an abandoned building. And the backstory on how this happened was he apparently he was only there to get a good to sort of not practice, but like kind of scope out the area. And as he was looking around in his scope, he said that he just so happened to recognize Larry Flint coming out of the cafeteria. So he decided to just shoot him right then and there. And he fired off a couple shots and hit, I think, Flint's lawyer as well. He had put the rifle in I think like a pillowcase or something so that he could exit the building without supposedly anybody raising anyone's suspicion after he shot Larry Flint. And the interesting thing I think about that is like he completely got away with it. Like we would have never known that was actually Joseph Paul Franklin who had shot Larry Flint had he had not confessed to it. But they never prosecuted Franklin for that, simply because he was already on death row and had already had multiple convictions. So there was no need to go through it like yet another trial and waste public money. But he considered the sniping of Larry Flint and civil rights activist Vernon Jordan as to be his greatest accomplishments.
Now, this brings us to another issue because Joseph Paul Franklin, by your own admission, is somebody who has been very difficult to catch. He's changing the guns after every crime. He's traveling all over the country. How did they catch him in the end?
So there was, so they first kind of started to get on his trail after he had sniped those two joggers in these two young men. And I say young men, but they were really kind of just teens. I think they were 18, 19. These two young black men jogging with two white women in Salt Lake City. So he had he had traveled to Salt Lake, killed these two men with sniper style, I guess you could say, and then headed off to Cincinnati, where he killed two more young teenage boys, I think 13 and 14. And at this point, I think that there were multiple things going on. So as opposed to probably 10 years later, you had a lot more coordination between law enforcement agencies. They had, I think at this point, I think they had already started the National Crime Information Database or something. And I think it's called NCIC, I think, or something. And they were able to connect the shootings in Salt Lake. The investigators got in contact with the investigators in Cincinnati, and they started to compare notes, and they really felt that this was the same individual. Now, not only that, but that killing in Salt Lake, he had apparently he was pretty sloppy with that. When he was in Salt Lake, they had corroborated that this individual was out looking for prostitutes. So he had like several different prostitutes say that this person that you're looking for, like, I believe I was with this person. He was going under the name, I think he had entered Salt Lake and told one prostitute that he was going under the name Bill Hagman. But I'm not sure if that's the name that he registered on the hotel with. So they knew from multiple witness accounts that they were looking for like somebody in a Camaro, that there was a very suspicious individual, and that they're looking. And so when they, I think the big lead came when they looked at the tire tracks and found that the tire tracks were made by a manufacturer who only sold on the East Coast. So now they know that they're looking for a Camaro with like these special tires that are only found on the East Coast. And I think yeah, and I can't remember. I think this was in Kentucky where he in some ways he actually brought about his own his own capture because he was at a hotel, and police had actually were called to the hotel to arrest the tenant next door. And what had happened was the police had blocked in his car. So oddly enough, and like you would think that somebody who had evaded law enforcement for so long wouldn't make a mistake like this, but apparently he called both the hotel and the police, requesting that they move the police cars so they weren't blocking him in. And not just on one time, but apparently he had called the police station 5 times. And finally, I think one of the police officers had noticed some guns in his car, and then they ran the plates and found that he was wanted. They were somehow able to get, I think, the license plate from like other witnesses in Salt Lake or Cincinnati or something, and but they had his plate, and then when they ran his plate, they found out that he was wanted, and that's how they first captured Joseph Paul Franklin, and they found, I think, they found things like wigs and like just a multitude of IDs and everything. So and I think that's basically, yeah, the gist of like how he first got caught.
Okay, though, but after Joseph Paul Franklin was captured, he's in prison, and you mentioned that there's an MSNBC documentary out there, and he's
Yep.
being interviewed while he's in prison, and he's talking about how he would go on to give up all of these racist and white supremacist views, and they openly said there that they didn't believe him, like after the interview's over, the follow-up notes. He doesn't seem like he's showing genuine remorse for the crimes. But what's your take on the subject? Because I know mine. I know what I would say, but I'd like to hear yours
Yeah.
first.
I excuse me. I kind of tend to think that I don't think that he was sorry or genuine. And my take on it is because if he was, he would have confessed to literally everything that he had done, and we would know almost all the murders, or if not all the murders that he had committed. But then, and there's other reasons too as to why I think that he was probably playing both sides of the coin, and in that, saying that he's a changed man and everything, and will even try and go so far as to try and get other people out of like racist ideology. Like, I just have a hard time seeing how somebody that could be so cold and brutal. And I'll share a story with you. It's to what I mean. Like, I know one of his murders was he was I think with a woman for about 2 weeks there. I think this was in Atlanta. After a couple weeks of sleeping with this woman, like I think she had confessed to have been with a black man, and he simply just I think he took her out somewhere and took a shotgun to her head. And this is the type of individual that like it just takes it in just an incredibly cold individual to do such a thing. And in the past, he had also he has also been known to have stated that that killing people was actually really fun. It was a very fun thing that and yeah, we'll get into some of this other stuff, but like he on many occasions it was referred to as his hunting, and it's a very fun activity for him. And there's like the more you start researching Joseph Paul Franklin, you really do get a sense that like this is a guy that's just on another level. And I'm not buying it that he was sorry. I think he was sorry that like some of these crimes got him caught. Is all I'm thinking. But anyway, that's my take on it.
Okay, and I'm going to give you my take on the subject, and
Sure.
feel free to respond. So one of the follow-up notes that they said in this MSNBC documentary, which, as you said, is on YouTube and anyone can watch it for free, is that Joseph Paul Franklin knew right from wrong. And when they say that, they say this all the time in the true crime world. And I think what they actually mean is that he was aware of the law. He knew what he was doing was illegal, and he knew what he was doing would not be accepted by the majority of the populations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the first thing that he was trying to do was to save face and try to make himself somewhat of a sympathetic character, which psychopathic and sociopathic people try to do. They like to manipulate. They like to use their words and instead of force to overpower people. Sometimes. The second thing I'm thinking of is it possible that he was trying to build up some chance at getting clemency or some chance that a politician would have some sympathy for him or recognize, now, wait a second, this guy's reformed. He's been changed. We can't execute him. And the third thing that I'm thinking of, and maybe I'm projecting a little bit too much or blending stories together, but I'm reminded of the stories of the serial killer Gordon Northcott, who was the Wineville chicken coop killer. And, he's about to be executed. And he's almost doing a Pascal's wager, almost, but not quite. When he's afraid of dying and he's afraid of what's on the other side. And, just in case that he's actually going to meet some type of spiritual judgment, that he has converted and that he's going to be saved. So all of those are self-serving, and all of those are just thinking about himself, but it's about his image. It's about what benefits him. And of course, it's about getting some type of reward in some way. And feel free to respond to any of that.
Yeah, and added to this is a small commentary on like his like core beliefs. I mean, of course, at the end of the day, I mean, we can't get into whether or not, like, we don't really know what's going on inside somebody's head. We're not mind readers, but like as kind of further commentary on some of his core beliefs, he believed, not only was he like a sort of like an incredibly religious person, but he also was a big believer in like spiritualism, the occult, numerology, astrology, just all sorts of like, just I guess you could say like out there things. And added to that, I know I think recently, like I've heard some of your shows, like you've talked about how like there's some like with the Ku Klux Klan, they believe in being invisible, like the invisible empire, and like maybe the symbol makes you invisible and all this other stuff. I know that now there was a woman who managed to get a confession out of Joseph Paul Franklin, Melissa Powers, and she wrote at one point that like he actually believed that like during, I don't know if all of his crimes or at least some of his crimes, that like he really believed that he was invisible. Like, so you really are dealing with somebody who just has these like really out there ideas, belief in reincarnation, belief in belief in the, I guess you could say, like the kind of like the magic of numbers. So he would, I think one of the not stipulations, but one of sort of the things that he would do in deciding whether or not he would talk to, like, let's say a certain lawyers, certain people is he had like I don't know if you can call it an extreme OCD, but like he liked to add up the letters in somebody's name, and like if it was like a good number, he could talk to you. If it was a bad number, like then he wouldn't talk to you. So it's hard to know a person who is that like sort of like I have no doubt that he believed in a lot of this sort of stuff that like is out there, but as to what he believed on his dying day, I definitely don't know. But I kind of tend to think that like a lot of this, like I've been reformed is a bit, it's very suspect.
But in regards to the statements about the Ku Klux Klan and the Invisible Empire, the comments that you were referring to that I had made previously on Black Box Online Radio were more or less that, as far as I know, And I think this goes without saying that the Ku Klux Klan does not actually believe that any type of symbol makes you invisible. They use the name the Invisible Empire because it's meant to wear a disguise of some sort so that people cannot recognize them when they're out in public. And after 1915, 1916, and so on, they would wear the famous conical hoods. But prior to that, it was actually very normal to wear any sort of disguise. And the story that I told once on a Zodiac Monday was that one time somebody was even caught and embarrassed because he was recognized by the neighbors because he was trying to disguise himself using his wife's dress and so on, and they had a laugh at him. This is back in the 1800s.
Right.
So that's just more about some type of mask or some type of costume to hide your identity. And it's not actually intentionally designed to make people think that you're invisible. But when I looked into Joseph Paul Franklin very briefly, I wasn't under the impression that he actually thought he was invisible, but it sounds like from what you said, he actually believed that in some type of almost psychotic state where he has some type of larger than life ability. And is that a fair assessment of what you said?
Yes. Yeah. Like that's actually very, quite honestly, that's very benign to some of the other things that he has mentioned before. So, as an example, I know that in one interview he gave, I think it was the Inside Edition, which unfortunately, like I wish that I would have recorded it because it's now off the internet. You can't really find this anymore. But like in one interview, he tells the host that he believed that getting into his reincarnation, that he is the reincarnated version, like I think the third version of Joseph of the Bible. So the first version being the Joseph of Genesis, the second version being Joseph, the father of the husband of Mary of the New Testament, and then that he was the third version of Joseph, and that his wife was the reincarnated version of Mary, mother of Jesus from the Bible. And so you, in some ways, it's sort of like you have no idea what this guy is thinking. I know after his first murder of the couple in Madison, Wisconsin, that we were talking about earlier, he also believed, amongst other things, that like everything that he did was like he was doing this for God. Like this was the work of God, and that like after that first murder, like he said, well, obviously, I forgot what book this was from, but like he believed that God had actually blinded the eyes of the law enforcement looking for him. God had actually blinded law enforcement so that he could get away. So, so yeah, it just kind of goes to show sort of like what type of individual. Like, on the one hand, he was able to evade law enforcement for so long. Is like not a lot of criminals can do what he did, but on the other hand, like it's you have this completely delusional like type of thinking.
Okay, yes, and I definitely do agree that it is delusional. But right now, Sam, I would like to give you the floor and just ask, do you have a final concluding message for the listeners of Black Box Online Radio? How can people find your books? What are the titles of them? And any final send-off?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I have I have a few things out there on Amazon. I think the work that I had put the most time into is about a $19, almost $20 book. If you just type in Sam Fisher Zodiac, you'll see, like, I've actually written a few more small, I guess you could say, like free pamphlets for Amazon Kindle, which you can download for free. But my one and only printed book is available on Amazon for just about $19, $20.
And I would like to remind everybody that I will be doing an episode with Sam Fisher on Zodiac Monday, where we're going to be talking all about Joseph Paul Franklin as a Zodiac suspect. And if you want to follow along with the discussions on Zodiac Monday, once again, you can hit the like button and subscribe. And for now, I'll say, Sam Fisher, thank you so much.
Thank you.